Well, hello everyone, and welcome into another episode of the Payne and Drain Show. I'm your host Zach Payne. With me is my co-host Alex Drain, and very similar to last year, Alex. The Lions start the year with a big win, have a letdown in week 2, and then answer back in week 3 with a good defensive effort. What were your main takeaways from this game against the Arizona Cardinals?
Well, you'd like to focus on the win. Unfortunately, there are other things to discuss. A spate of injuries in that game that has continued to pile up even on the off day. We learned some more yesterday. So that's going to be a major discussion point, unfortunately. But the win itself was good. They played a really great defensive effort, I think, outside of that first drive was their best, most coherent sequence defensively of the year, especially in the second half. And that's really encouraging. And ground game was pretty solid. I think Goff took a step forward, but still some issues that we'll talk about. So overall, nice progress, but maybe dampened a little bit by the injury situation.
Yeah, and we'll save the conversation on injuries for later in the show. But to start with, the offense, it was a Jekyll and Hyde sort of day for the offense, where in the first half it looked like everything we wanted, everything we were asking for and hoping for, and everything personally I wanted to see, which was a bigger emphasis on the ground game, a lot more David Montgomery early on. Jared Goff got into a rhythm. And then in the second half, it all kind of went away, and the Lions end up getting shut out in the second half after putting up 20 points in the first. It seemed like every time the Lions tried to find a groove in the second half, they would just get into the same kind of patterns where it's like run, run, pass, or Goff is just missing reads, and then there was an interception down there. It wasn't as coherent as it was in, or cohesive as it was in the first half.
Yeah, I think the first thing we can talk about is the ground game in particular. Really interesting how much they used two tight ends and six OL in this game. I didn't check the PFF snap counts, but Dan Skipper's snap count had to have been maybe like 8 or 10. I mean, there were a lot of six OL snaps in this game, and I don't think there were hardly any in those first two games, maybe one or two here or there, but that really stood out, especially on the first drive where they played in either 6 OL or 12 personnel or both the entire drive pretty much and
Mhm.
really set the tone on the ground. It was kind of a back to basics sort of thing. It was a simplified ground game. They were mostly running zone concepts, not a lot of their usual sort of difficult or complex run attack. They kept it simple. They beefed up front. Arizona gave them a lot of light fronts, a lot of light boxes. They took advantage of that, and it really got them going in this game. And I thought David Montgomery had a really nice game as well.
Yeah, and so I think it was Taylor Decker who came out after the game and said their goal on the first drive was they were going to run the ball first play, and if they got at least 4 yards, they were going to stay in jumbo the whole drive. And they picked up like 12 or 13 or something. And so the whole way down the field, they were just hammering the ball, and Jared Goff was very patient, willing to take checkdowns to Brock Wright. And it worked amazingly. I thought both running backs were really good in this game. I think Jahmyr Gibbs has very quietly put together two very impressive games on the ground in which he's had over 5 yards of carry, and he has shown that he is capable of breaking to the second level. The difference between what Gibbs has done and maybe taking that to the next level to where people will start to hype him up more is just having some of those second level runs break home a little bit more often, where instead of a 12-yard gain, maybe he can get 20, 25, get some of these more explosive runs and really pay off these explosive runs a little bit better. But his ability to break tackles has been something that's improving. Like, we know that he's not gonna break as many tackles as Montgomery will, obviously, because he's a smaller back, but he is very good at breaking through arm tackles, and he's so quick that it's hard to get your hands on him. And I do think that Gibbs is going to continue his ascent. Montgomery's going to be the stabilizing influence the whole season, but Gibbs, I think, by week 8, week 9, you're going to notice that, oh yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs has quietly become like a superstar in the league here.
Yeah, I mean, Gibbs had a one really important play, I think in the second half, or maybe it was in the first half. No, it was. It was right after the fiasco with the whistles and the 2 minute warning, which we can get to. Third and 12, they come back after the timeout and they run in that
Draw
situation.
play.
Yeah, and he picks up like 15 yards. That was a good hard run from him. Montgomery, I thought, dragging tacklers. I thought he regapped really well in this game as well. A lot of good stuff on the ground overall. I mean, there were a few issues here and there, but that was really the meat of their game. They ran it a lot. They seemed to really focus on last week was too many pass attempts. This week
It,
we want to
yeah.
establish ourselves on the ground, and they had a lot of success doing it, and that's probably why they won the game, at least half of it on the offensive side.
Yeah, and the way the offense is structured, there is, a plethora of weapons, but because the Lions just how they run their offense, not everyone's going to get involved every week. We've seen that with Sam Laporta over the first few weeks. Unfortunately, he got hurt after having a couple of nice catches. But this just happened to be the week Jameson Williams didn't get involved, and we've saw in week 1 it was the week where Amon-Ra St. Brown didn't get involved, and last week Montgomery had a bad game. Like the rotating cast of who's going to perform for the Lions is something that I know people are going to overreact to, but every week, I think it might have been Ben Johnson himself who said, like, you know what, every week we're going to have a new problem because we didn't get someone the ball this week. But were you concerned at all with JMO specifically having a quiet day?
Not really, because they didn't throw it that much to begin with. There's only so many targets that can go around, and something we've talked about is not forcing it. That we wanted to see Goff just take what was available. I think he did a better job of that in this game, but that's overall why you can't really go out there and say we got to get it to this one guy. You just got to see what the defense gives you. And again, 23 pass attempts in total, so there's only
Yeah.
so much to go around in this game. And they gave him one screen pass that he made a man miss. That was a nice play. Um, Otherwise, he had three targets in total. I don't remember what the third one was. The second one was just a miss from Goff. He should have had that. It was a deep out route, like 20, 30 yards downfield, and Goff just put it too far to the sideline. And Jamo wasn't able to drag the feet there. If that throws a little bit better, that's a big play for him.
I think the third target is something that we had DM'd about where it was JMO streaking
Oh,
downfield and
oh yeah,
Goff,
oh yeah.
yeah, Goff, he forces the deep shot, but unironically, he might have had him if he led JMO to the inside, which is where he was streaking, but Goff forces it to the outside where the two defenders are, and there's just no chance he's going to catch it.
Yeah, so that's a perfect example of what I was sort of talking about, where you're trying to force it. Like that play is what happens when you say we got to get it to this one guy because maybe there's a chance there. But what I hated about that play in particular, 3rd and 8, I believe, from the plus 45, he has two options underneath in the flats, both maybe 5 yards off the line of scrimmage, both wide open. If they do get tackled short, it's 4th and 1. I mean,
And you're
they're
going for it.
probably first downs. If not, it's 4th and short, and you're going. And he throws the deep ball, and maybe he can give him a better ball, and there's a chance there. But he wasn't wide open. And for me, 3rd and long, 3rd and 8, and further in plus territory, half the game should be just setting up 4th down, at least giving yourself that opportunity. That's situational football. And if you're going to throw the deep ball in that situation, to me, it's got to be a guy wide open. It's got to be a guy with 5, 10 yards of separation, and it's a very high percentage throw because otherwise, that's just not the objective, right? We're throwing the deep ball on 1st and 10. We throw the deep ball on 2nd and 2. 3rd and 8 from the plus 45 in a game where you need that score to give yourself some padding. It just was not the right time for it. And so overall, I think Goff avoided that kind of thing, but that one did stand out.
Yeah, and aside from that, the other receivers, I mean, Amon-Ra had a standard Amon-Ra day, 7 catches for 70 some yards and a touchdown. And Sam Laporta, as we mentioned, couple catches before getting injured. Brock Wright actually had a lot of involvement in this game, getting a lot of underneath work, was just kind of catch and run. That play action leak play to Brock Wright continues to be Ben Johnson's like best play call every single year. Every 4 or 5 weeks when he breaks it
Well,
out, it's
no
like
one
a
ever stops
guaranteed.
it. So,
Yeah, it's a guaranteed first down. I did like to see Goff checking down a little bit more in this game, but that almost it was kind of a give and take because he was checking it down more, aside from the one play we just talked about. But then it kind of got a little, he just got a little too close to the fire on his interception, where he tries to check it down in the middle and linebacker just drops into coverage and Goff never sees him, and it's still a bit of a theme where Jared Goff is not doing a great job at seeing linebackers in coverage. Do you like what is your level of concern with that?
uh, it's not full concern yet. There's still a lot of time to go, but definitely alarms are starting to be raised a little bit. I think you can't really deny that at this point in time. Because that's just a rookie mistake. That's a pretty rudimentary sort of thing. You're watching that live, you're just like, oh man, like that. He's watching the DB on the tight end, sees him get a step. And he's like, okay, now he's open, got to throw it, and then uh-oh, the linebacker's right there, and you just got to see it, man. I mean, I don't really know what else to say. I think this game as a whole was encouraging from Goff. I'm 18 of 23. I thought my charting came out much more positively. But the biggest problem I had is that I have six negative events for him in this game, and a couple of them are super consequential. That one is an example, and then the JMO miss is an example. Just situations where you're either gifting the opponent likely points or depriving yourself of likely points because of a high leverage miss, and that's the thing that still needs to be weeded out.
Yeah, and not to dwell too much on the negatives, like Goff is on pace currently for over 20 interceptions, which is something that he hasn't done in Detroit. He hasn't done in his career. I don't think he will throw 20 interceptions. I think that number will probably be closer to, 13, 14, a little bit more than he did last year, just based on how many games we have remaining. But to focus on more of the positive side, while the offense didn't really have a good second half at all, it was Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown, but it really was just Goff, though, putting the game on his shoulders on that final drive and closing it out. We saw with the run game, it was at a point in the game where the Cardinals know, okay, they're going to run the ball, and they clamp down and stop it. And a huge third down conversion to Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then a huge third down conversion with Goff using his legs on one of those rare rollouts from him, picking up a game-winning first down. So, like, to his credit, it was overall a good game from him, I thought. And when it came down to it in crunch time, he stepped up, he elevated his play, and got the Lions the win.
Yeah, the connection to Amon-Ra is what we've seen so many times from him and Amon-Ra. They have that chemistry, they have the timing down. I do want to point out the Amon-Ra touchdown earlier in the game. He had a really easy touchdown to Gibbs, open, just like five,
Yeah,
6 yards over the middle. But again, that's one of those just sort of he's still kind of locked in pre-snap, which is a little iffy. But again, when you have the timing him and Amon-Ra have, he can get away with it. They got away with it on that touchdown. And another example is this conversion that they just have that thing down. He knows where to throw it. He knows when to throw it. Amon-Ra gets open, knows how to catch the ball in tight situations. We saw them clinch the win against the Rams last year in the playoffs with that sort of play. And we've seen it so many times. And that's another example of just sort of the back to basics nature of this game, I think, in a lot of ways. So I think it feels good for Goff. I think it's a little bit of a momentum boost of sorts to be able to close that game out yourself and not have the defense have to hang on for dear life. So overall, some positive things. I think a step in the right direction, but we need to see him build on it next week against Seattle.
I will say the Amon-Ra touchdown, I don't know if you've seen the all 22 of it, but it's actually absolutely hilarious because you have Gibbs wide open on the angle route. You have, I think it was Laporta who was breaking open. He was also open. And then Tim Patrick just gets tackled in the end zone on the short side of the field. No, there was no flag, there was no nothing. But the DB didn't even try to hide the fact that he took down Tim Patrick. So Goff really could have thrown to anyone and it would have worked out. It looks funny that he threw to the most contested guy. I mean, again, it works out, but yeah.
Yeah, it's I will say on the second half as a whole, it was much clunkier than the first half. They didn't get any points, but I didn't think they were that far away. I thought there were individual issues on each
Yeah.
drive that just sort of pop up, right? So like your first drive, you're in a 3rd and 1 really early, and you have a false start penalty, backs you up to 3rd and 6, miss ID'd protection, and Goff kind of panics and throws an incompletion. I think that was his first incompletion at that time. Second drive, you have an interception. Then the third drive, you have the 4th and 1 stuff where you're 2nd and 2 on that drive. Goff misses JMO open, then 3rd and 2 stuff, 4th and 1 stuff, and tough, right? And then you just kind of keep going down the line. The second or then the drive after that, you're starting to march out towards midfield a little bit. Then you have a sack that happens off a 3-man rush. And that sets you back. You never recover. And so it just kind of kept happening that like the drive after that one, you have the JMO throw on 3rd and 8 that he forces it. They're just each drive I had a thing like, man, if they could just fix this one thing, they'd be in a better spot. And it just wasn't clicking at the efficiency rate you want to, but it wasn't disastrous. They were still gaining yards, they were still getting in situations. It just was falling apart, which is disappointing, but it's better than sort of being hapless.
Yeah, I think the theme of this offense is similar to what we've seen in past years, where they are very good at managing different situations, but the one thing is they are, I think, below average at recovering from negative situations. If they have a holding penalty, there's almost no chance that they're going to recover and get a first down. If a false start on a 3rd and short can cripple them, they seem to be like they have to stay on schedule, and if they aren't on schedule, they get rattled. That seems to be the theme. I do want to touch on the offensive line, though. I thought some of the run blocking was really good in this game, and I loved seeing some of the rallying moments where David Montgomery would just keep fighting for yards, and then a pile would ensue where the Lions' offensive line just gets behind him and trudges along for another 5, 6 yards. There was the one play in the second half where Montgomery literally was hovered, like suspended in the air for like 7 yards because the Lions' offensive line would refuse to let go.
Yeah, that play was pretty funny. I think Montgomery said that he was laughing the whole
Laughing. I
time.
hope he was mic'd up.
That'd be pretty good. Um, we have to talk for a minute about the hook and ladder touchdown.
Yes. That so okay, this is where we get back to Ben Johnson's play design. Like we talked about sometimes he's getting a little too cute, but in a situation like that where the Lions are driving, we you need to just keep getting closer to the end zone because the we talked about the biggest problem against the Buccaneers was from the 10 to the 20. It was getting inside the 10 from the 20 and then continuing to push towards the end zone. And they bust out this hook and ladder play, which I mean, I don't know how often you see that at the NFL level. We know that they tried to do it on the last play against the Bucks last week. Absolutely perfect execution from Amon Ra and Jameer Gibbs on that play. Like, I don't even know. It was just amazing execution.
That was pretty darn cool. I don't think you can say much else than that. Really rare to see it in the NFL, rare to see it in college too. I mean, that's such a hard play to pull off. You have to have the timing synced up, and to run it in a big situation like that to get a touchdown at the end of the first half was really a good swing in momentum. But you gotta love it. That's all I really have to say about it. That they managed to execute it
Yeah.
basically perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely perfectly. And it resulted in one of the funniest stat lines I've ever seen.
Oh yeah.
Jameer Gibbs, he had 20 receiving yards and a touchdown, but did not record a reception in this game. Zero catches for 20 yards and a touchdown. But yeah, so I think those kind of plays are serve as a reminder that Ben Johnson is incredibly creative and the Lions offense is capable of pulling off some really unique plays. We know that they've obviously worked on that hook and ladder play for a while because to be able to execute it at that level, you obviously have to have high end talent, but you also have to have that talent be working on plays like that for a while. So it serves as a reminder that as we go throughout the season, there's going to be more plays like that. They won't necessarily be quite as effective. They're not always going to result in touchdowns, but we know that Ben Johnson has a bag of tricks that he tends to dip into every 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, that always good to have a few things like that in your bag and being able to pull them out at random moments. They need to be used at the right times, and you need to practice them to get them right. But if you can pull one off like that, no NFL team is ready for that. No NFL
Mm-hmm.
team is expecting it. No one is practicing defense against it. So it's a really neat way to give yourself some free yards when you really need it. And late in the half, looking for points before halftime, that was a good time to pull it out, and they nailed the dismount there.
Yeah, and we'll talk about what happened earlier in that drive later in the game theory. Same with the injuries. Do you have any other thoughts about the offense before we move on?
Yeah, the offensive line, 4 false starts in this game, way too
Yeah, I'm in
many.
trouble.
One for Laporta, three for Glasgow, Sewell, and Decker. And they were in some tough situations, including that huge 3rd down one that changes 3rd and 1 to 3rd and 6. I mean, that's just killer. That needs to get cleaned up. Thought Pass Pro is still a little wobbly. They had some
There,
misid'd protections.
it's the second time in 3 games that there has been a sack off of an interior stunt that Ragnar Glasgow just they got some sort of miscommunication and they just got completely beat there. Zeitler didn't even react to it, and the Cardinals, I forget who it was on the Cardinals, but came through for an easy sack on Goff.
Yeah, Glasgow I thought wasn't great in this game. I thought personally just on rewatch, but I didn't have a lot of notes on other offensive linemen. The 2 minute warning play, the pick six called back. At first watch, I was like, wow, that was a break. Second watch, and turning the volume up more, you could definitely hear the whistles before the snap.
Okay,
Like
yeah.
that was pretty clear. If you watch the clip, I think like Khalif Raymond stops running a route. It's very clear that some of the players stop playing. So that's a good sign that that whole thing was much ado about nothing. They blew it dead really quick. Sometimes that they're a little lax with the 2 minute warning, like delay games, but they were all over that one. Ultimately, what happened in the play wasn't a break. The play didn't happen, so it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, I will say, like, watching it live, it definitely seemed like they blew the whistle early. Like, I
Yeah,
still think they definitely blew it on 2:01 on the play clock, but I mean, I don't know. There's not much you could do about it. It's not a reviewable play. It's not anything that anyone can change. So, no, move on.
yeah.
If
At the end
if
of
it
the
happened against the Lions, it would be frustrating, and we'd probably be mad about it. But I don't know. Like,
you
just
can only get so worked up about it because what happened is a direct, in part, result of the whistle being blown. Right? It's not like there was this legal play everyone was playing and then it got called back. At the end of the day, everyone knew this play was blown dead. Like it was just, I guess,
yeah.
those that didn't hear the whistle, but this was a result of the way that it went down.
Yeah, and we talked about the fact, like we DM'd about the fact that, it's a weird play that you haven't really seen before. And the closest I remember is the opposite of that happening, where they didn't blow the play dead. It was the Packers Thursday night game last year in Lambeau, where at the end of
Right.
the third quarter, the refs don't call the end of the quarter, even though the clock pretty clearly hit zeros before it was snapped, and the Packers get like a 40-yard completion on the play because no one realized that there was like that split second where it's like, oh, the game's still going. So it's the same kind of thing where you can't really get too mad about it. And again, neither play ends up mattering that much, but it is noteworthy because I know some Cardinals fans were very upset about that.
I mean, definitely if you were watching it live and you didn't hear the whistle before the snap, then it would have been quite a momentum swing. But upon further review, not a lot to get worked up there. I always feel that they should just have I don't know, like a shot clock buzzer or what, but it's always seemed weird to me that you rely on the referees who are watching several different things to handle the clock. And that's where you get those situations like the Lamar Jackson Ravens
Yeah.
delay of game that was never called against the Lions a few years ago. It should be standardized. It shouldn't just be a matter of luck over whether the referee noticed it in time. Like they don't have this problem in hockey or in basketball. Like this
Yeah,
seems like
just
there are easy fixes to this problem that we're
yeah,
not
it's
using.
eliminating it's the whole like robot refs, right?
Yeah.
It's taking human error out of the equation for something that is not subjective. When the time runs out is not a subjective issue. It's not something that is up to the referee's discretion. So don't give them an opportunity to screw up something that's very black and white. So now moving on to the defense, we didn't have quite as dominant of an Aiden Hutchinson game, but it's kind of hard to replicate what he did. He still got on the stat sheet with a sack and had a number of pressures, but aside from him, it was a very the defensive line is a bit of a mixed bag in terms of their ability to contain Kyler Murray. I thought they got better at it as the game went on. It was definitely the first drive in particular where the defensive line was crushing the pocket a little too aggressively and allowing Murray to slip out. But as I do think that in general they just got a little undisciplined at times in terms of their contains and letting someone who is very fast run away and slip out of the pocket at times.
Um, I thought it was, especially on rewatch, a big issue that first drive, and then I thought they did much better after that. That first drive, they have an issue with like a zone read. Didn't look like they had a scrape exchange on. Um, Hutchinson bites. Rodriguez is shuffling in as well, and Kyler cuts it outside.
It's gonna
Then they
happen.
have a 1st and 20 scramble where Barnes isn't able to hold the edge there, and Kyler Murray picks up the whole chunk himself. And after that drive, it was very much like, uh-oh, this is the same problems manifesting again. This is going to be an issue for us. But after that, there wasn't a whole lot else. I don't remember what Kyler Murray's rushing yard stat line was in total, but I think he had like maybe 6 carries for not a ton of yards. It wasn't
He was their
in the
leading rusher, to be fair.
well, they weren't doing a whole lot else, and then another
No
phase.
one
So
has yet.
5 attempts for 45 yards. So he gets 21 on that scramble, and he probably had like 10 or 12 on that zone read. So that's most all of his yards and all of his carries on that drive. After that, he has like a couple runs to the sideline. He obviously has the fourth down one, but they did a fine job of that. They managed to bother him a little bit, get him running around. Some of those late drives get killed from pressure where he just kind of has to heave it. So was a pretty disappointing start, I felt like, but after that, I was pretty encouraged.
For what it's worth, the defensive line, it wasn't necessarily as flashy of a game in terms of getting pressure as the first 2 weeks, where it seemed like it was a race to the quarterback. In this game, it seemed like the pressure of the defensive line kind of reverted the Cardinals' offense to just to chuck it up and see what happens type of team, which that's a good position to be in. I know that defensive pass interferences happen and that those are ticky tacky calls at times, but if you're forcing your opponent to just heave up prayers every time, that's a good spot to be in. Especially since Kyler Murray started the game, he was like 7 for 7 or something. He started perfect, and then after that, just it snowballed into a bit of a disaster for the Cardinals in the second half.
Yeah, they give up some yards in that on that first drive through the air, especially. They're not really bothering him a whole lot, but as the game went along, they started to crack it more and more. This isn't a game where you're necessarily going to tell your guys to pin their ears back and go get the quarterback because of the need to hold the pocket. That is the premium that a quarterback like Kyler Murray or like Lamar Jackson provide for their team. And the Lions had to deal with it. And I think overall they did a pretty good job of it. And at the end of the day, the offensive stats for the Cardinals in this game reflect a really nice effort from this Lions team, particularly in comparison to the way the Cardinals shredded the Rams the week before. And yardage was pretty similar to the Lions game on like a per play basis against Buffalo, but they got 28 points in that game and they only had 13 in this game. And 6 of the 13 were like 50 some yard Prater field goals. So
Yeah.
I think it was a really good showing overall.
I think the most important stat from this game is the Cardinals coming into the week. They were 14 of 24 on third down. They were 58% third down conversion rate. Against the Lions on Sunday, 1 for 9 and 0 for 2 on fourth down. The Lions defense, when they got down to third down, which happened a lot, they were getting off the field. And that is something that in the past, it would be, hey, it's bend don't break. They're gonna convert yards. Just pray for a field goal in the red zone. Now the Lions are saying, "Hey, you know what? You're getting to midfield, and we're just gonna stop you here." It's a lot more. It's they're just doing a better job on third downs, especially of holding up in coverage, getting to the quarterback. We talked about that in the season preview episode. The cohesion between the pass rush and the secondary. We're seeing that. We're starting to see the evolution of that. It hasn't been perfect. And of course, that's going to happen when you have a rookie corner out there and Carlton Davis, who is good, not great. It's going to happen at times where you get beat, but for what it's worth, the Lions have done a very good job, especially against some good offenses early on.
Yeah, I thought the coverage actually at some points was outshining the defensive line. And again, part of that is defensive line needing to mush rush and stay in their lanes, all that kind of stuff. But you had several snaps in this game where Kyler isn't under pressure of any kind for 5, 6, 7 seconds, and yet he's standing there, standing there, standing there, standing there, standing there. And I'm not watching all 22 on that, but you kind of have to assume the coverage is pretty good if he's not pulling the trigger. And that was the case multiple times in this game. And in some cases, he was able to eventually get a completion because it's very hard to keep covering
It's going to
for
happen.
infinite amounts of time. But the longer that you're able to cover and cover and cover and cover is a good indicator overall. It shows that you're doing a lot of things right for a long period of time on a given snap. And that's ultimately something that is translatable and portends well to future events. Um, I think in particular in coverage, I thought Carlton Davis was really quite good in this game. I thought he was really solid.
Mhm. I think I do want to just highlight both outside corners for a second because
Sure.
so we saw last week the Lions played more the first 2 weeks the Lions played more zone against teams who had some higher grade weapons. The Cardinals, Marvin Harrison Jr. looks to be a very good player that will grow, but he's a rookie. And you have Trey McBride, who, you held in check. The Lions were just playing man coverage a lot of this game. They were telling the Cardinals to stand up and beat them. And as a result of that, Terrion Arnold and Carlton Davis were just sitting in man coverage, which is what both of them do well. This is what the Lions have wanted to do, was play more man coverage. They do that in this game, and it allows both their safeties to roam around and be a little bit more free, which just absolutely destroyed everything the Cardinals wanted to do. Every time there was a guy open, one of the Lions safeties was there to either break it up or limit the gain. And one, I want to highlight the Kirby Joseph interception in particular because that was quietly one of Terrion Arnold's better reps as a pro so far. He's in man coverage, but he knows he has help deep and inside. So he plays to the outside. He forces it's a go route, forces the receiver to run. I think it was Marvin Harrison,
Yep.
forces him to run the go to the inside. Murray thinks that he has him beat. He's like, oh wow, because Arnold's 3 yards away from him, but heaves it up, and Kirby Joseph's waiting there because Terrion played it perfectly to where his help was on the field. And I know Arnold had another pass interference. It happens. He's gonna learn and get better at those. But on the whole, I thought both outside corners did a great job.
Yeah, I thought Arnold in particular improved as the game went along. There was still some things here and there. I think he had a missed tackle later in the game, but even his completions against later in that game were really good. At the second to last Cardinals drive, he gives up a completion to Marvin Harrison, but it's really tight coverage. It's a good throw, good catch. That's all you can ask for. And in the second half of this game, almost every other time they're targeting, or every time basically they're targeting Arnold, there's really good coverage. Fades down the sideline, he was all over. And then you look at that DPI in the first half, it's just to get your head around, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's basically all it is. But you can fix things like that are technique. You can refine and correct a problem with handsiness. You can refine and correct a problem with not turning your head around. You can't really fix, or it's very hard to fix, corners that are just getting blown by, corners that can't run with the guy, right? And that's not the issue here. So I think that's a positive indicator overall. And it was a bit of an issue too for Carlton Davis at one point where he gets hit with the DPI, where just let him go.
Yeah.
He's
I don't know
all
why he
over
was
him.
complaining so much.
Yeah, that was so weird. He's mad about it, and it's like you're all over this guy, but he's got great coverage on him. He's right there. If he just lets his hand go, he's in perfect position to break it up. Like let the hand go and play the ball, and that's a PBU. You did everything else right. So that was a little weird to me, but otherwise, I thought Carlton Davis's coverage was really quite good. He was in position, and I continue to like him as a run defender, assisting, coming down, making tackles. And the play he made on the 4th and 1 was really spectacular.
Oh,
That is a hard
unbelievable.
play to make.
Yeah. Even like I had conceded before the review, even if Kyler Murray had gotten that, it was still an unbelievable play by Davis. Just to get out there and force Murray to make that kind of effort, and he ended up tackling him short of the sticks. Like unbelievable. That was the Cardinals did everything they wanted to do. They fooled 10 of the defenders on the field into thinking it was a run up the middle, and Murray leaks out, and Davis is the only one who recognized it, and he went out and made a play. It's just incredible.
Yeah, you get the one-on-one matchup with the corner. You trust that Kyler Murray's going to be able to win that one-on-one and at least get a yard. But Davis just plays the angles so well, uses his speed well. And that review, I'm pretty sure if Kyler goes out of bounds, they don't overturn it. But his knee be or the shin slash
Hip or
knee,
something. Yeah.
yeah, landing down in bounds allowed you to slow it down, freeze the frame exactly there, and you get a spot overturned, which is really not easy to do, but perfectly lined up for the Lions in that situation. So you have two corners that look good. I thought Robertson, not a lot of events that I charted. They didn't really throw at him a lot, but
I Robertson, I think you'll notice him a lot more next week against the Seahawks. I think that's gonna
right.
be a
Well,
bigger
his
deal with
his
him.
snap count was definitely lower because they were playing
Yeah,
five-man fronts and they were playing 4-3 stuff quite a bit.
that's
So
another thing we'll have to address.
yeah, but uh when I did see him, I thought he was fine, and then the safeties really
Whew,
strong. Branch,
unbelievable.
I had very little negative on Branch. Kirby Joseph, I mean, almost 3 perfect weeks from him. Very little to complain about after a choppy
Yeah.
sophomore season for him. So really good looking stuff from the secondary as a whole. I think that's probably the biggest and most encouraging takeaway.
Yeah, I've loved what I've seen from Kirby Joseph so far. He is really looks like he's developed into a lot stronger of a coverage safety instead of just being a ball hawk. He had one rep in particular, I believe it was a 4th and 7 in the second half, where he is covering Trey McBride over the middle, and he just undercuts it perfectly for a PBU and kills the drive. No flags, everything was clean, and that is the evolution of his game where in the past he struggled in man coverage a lot last year. That was and my biggest gripe with him is and Aaron Glenn, honestly, I was like, why are you putting this guy in man coverage when he clearly can't do it? But to his credit, he's grown in that, and now they trust him more to come down into the box. Brian Branch has just been flying all over the field. He did get knocked out of the game. He's in concussion protocol. Hope he's okay. Hopefully, the extra day to recover will mean he plays against the Seahawks because, I mean, Brian Branch is. He might be the second best defender behind Hutchinson.
Yeah, I think that's certainly up there. There's quite a few guys I think you can make an argument for, including like an Ali McNeil, etc. But Branch is pretty
Also,
darn good.
yeah. And real quick, going back to the defensive line, real quick, because I think we should highlight the run defense. Through
Oh
three
yeah.
weeks, they have been everything we've built them up to be. That there has not been a running back that's come through and had a good game. All of the rushing yards from the past 2 weeks that have been significant have been from quarterbacks. And the Lions are holding running backs to under 3 yards a carry. I think it's like under 2.5 a carry. It's been spectacular.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about week to week because it's become just such a expected sort of thing.
Yeah.
Each week it's like, well, the other team won't be able to run it at all. They won't get anything, and then we'll see if our coverage does enough to slow their passing game down. That's basically what it was last year, and kind of been the story this season as well. And honestly, second half of 2022, like that was when
Yeah.
they ripped off that 8-2 or whatever it was to finish the season. That was the main driving force. Their offense got in a little better rhythm, and then the defense went from the worst defense anyone had ever seen to really bad in the secondary, but really good on the ground. And that
Yeah.
was enough to get them a bunch of wins. And it's just continued week after week. The defensive front's really good. Tackles do their job. The edges are not guys that run past the play. They don't get blown off the line in run defense. They set the edge really well. They battle in that phase of the game. And then the linebackers, the DBs, everyone helps out. It's a unit. Everyone works together, and they've been able to put together dominant run defense for close to 2 years now, and pretty much just seems like that's what we're going to expect the rest of the way.
Yeah, and shout out to Jack Campbell as well because there was a couple plays I noticed where the Cardinals would have concepts where they have a lot of movement on the line, and that causes the Lions' defensive line to crash inside, but it leaves the outside open. And Campbell was doing a fabulous job of reading the blocks and getting outside and wrapping up James Conner for a loss, or not, whether a loss or a short gain.
Yeah, I thought Campbell had a good game too.
Yeah, and he's been great. Like I've had no complaints with Campbell. I know we talked about the coverage, but he's been good.
Yeah.
Now, another note on the defensive line, real quick, in terms of the pass rush that we were talking about earlier. Levi Onwuzurike is currently fifth amongst all interior defensive linemen in pressures with 12 through 3 games. He's only one behind Chris Jones to tell you the kind of company he's been in terms of pass rush. I'm not gonna he got knocked out of this game for a little bit, came back. He's been as honestly as good as he was built up to be in camp. Like I'm kind of surprised that he's lived up to what everyone was kind of telling us he was. But I mean, what are your takes on him through a few weeks?
Yeah, he's been really good. They've been able to get quite a bit of pressure from just a four-man rush this season so far. Now, part of that's they've played some lackluster offensive lines due to injuries. We'll see how that continues as the years goes along. But he's been a part of that. I think Mekhi Wingo has also had some moments.
Yeah.
I think was he in a partial sack in this game, or maybe it was a
I
pressure?
I
I don't
think he
remember.
was I think he was the other guy crashing in when Hutchinson got a sack, and
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
one of those where if Hutch doesn't get him, then Wingo would have, and that's the second time that's happened. So
Right. So just seeing Wingo pop up is a good indicator for him. Levi's been a mainstay on those four-man rushes and in passing downs has been pretty darn good. He has the ability to move out to edge too, and I think we'll probably see more of that given recent injuries. So, really nice start to the year. It was looking a little unfortunate when he got banged up and exited the game, but getting him back is huge, and there's not much negative you can say about him so far.
Yeah, and another note, we talked about how the run defense is one of those things you expect to be good. Still important to highlight. DJ Reader, you expect him to be good. He has quietly been very good. He's been eating double teams and not budging at all. He's been getting good push against the run. He's actually getting surprising push in the pass rush too, where it's just you put him one on one, he's going to force the guy back at least 2 yards and again squeezing the pocket in. Reader has been quietly amazing as well.
Yeah, he has been everything you want him to be. I think some fans haven't noticed it as much so far because the run defense was so good last year anyway, but
Yeah.
it is a little bit different in that way. He hasn't gotten a sack or anything flashy. That's not what his job is, but when you do break down the tape, he's been noticeable and this defensive line's been good. Linebackers have been solid. Coverage looks okay. I mean, you're 3 weeks into the season, and as a whole, things have gone pretty fine so far, I think you could
Yeah.
say. They've gave up 13 to the Cardinals, they gave up 20 to the Bucks, 20 to the Rams. That's fine.
That's
And
good.
I think each week has been a more encouraging performance. So you'd like to see that keep going. And obviously this week is kind of the
There's the big
uh
early season litmus
yeah, the
test.
test given past results, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah. So aside from that, do you have any other thoughts on the defense?
No.
All right. Well, then we can go ahead and move on. Now, before we get into game theory, this is where I think I'm gonna sit down and talk about injuries for a second because man, the injury bug hit the Lions in a big way this week. So Marcus Davenport out for the season. Derek Barnes, he's on IR now. He is out for what was billed as a significant amount of time, not necessarily a season ender, but it's going to be a while before we see Derek Barnes again. Frank Ragnow, it was revealed yesterday that he has also suffered a partially torn pec. He's considered week to week. Dan Campbell said that Ragnow wants to play this week. No, you're taking you're taking a game off. We have the bye week in week 5. You're taking a couple of weeks off. Glasgow's going to slide over to center there. We also had Brian Branch get knocked into concussion protocol. Sam Laporta has a ankle sprain, which is considered day to day, and we also had Lee McNeil have a shoulder injury. He's considered day to day. The uh, from Dan Campbell is a lot more optimistic on Monday than he was on Sunday after the game regarding that injury, and then we also had Onwuzurike, as we talked about, left the game briefly. Terrion Arnold left the game briefly. It was not a good day for injuries.
No, the Davenport one is really the big story to me, but it's only so much of a story because everyone saw it coming a million miles away. So it is what it is. If they have a weakness in the front office, it is a bit of a penchant for guys that have major injury issues. We've seen this with Emmanuel Mosley. Um,
The only thing I'll say though, like I'll push back on that a little bit because you're taking a bet. It's a cheap bet.
sure.
It's a 1 year deal for it was 1 year deals for Mosley and Davenport where it's saying, hey, this guy when he's healthy, he's been good. We need cheap depth that can be good. So let's take a chance on a guy that has proven he can be good. And if he gets hurt, it is what it is. We'll just cut him loose.
Yeah, it is a bet to some degree, but it's definitely a couple years in a row you've had situations where it was a bit of a position of need, right? Corner last year,
That's
edge
the
this
problem I
year.
have with it, where you can make a bet on depth. You can't make a bet when you need
Right.
a legit contributor, and they don't have anyone else really. So that's my problem with it.
Right. So it's just you're putting guys in positions that you need someone to come through. You're betting that this guy can do it, but there is this major asterisk attached to it, and then they've rolled snake eyes on a few of those. So that's a little bit unfortunate. The Derek Barnes one is interesting to me. Obviously, he goes down as an inside linebacker in part. That's fine. They were without Anzalone in this game. Didn't bother me at all. It would have been nice to have him, but I didn't notice any real drop off. And we talked about that last week. Is linebacker is a position that the Lions are pretty deep at, and so if hopefully Anzalone's back this week, that half of Derek Barnes is fine. The pass rushing side of Derek Barnes, the ability to use him as sort of a 3-4 edge, that's unfortunate. I actually don't know how good he is even at that. They were only experimenting with him. It's the problem is now you can't continue the experiment and there's no obvious replacement. And that in
So
tandem with the Davenport thing is unfortunate.
the problem with the Barnes injury is now you had one guy doing multiple roles, and now you have to replace it by committee. So you're gonna see they were using Ben Neiman in that role, which no thanks. They're gonna use Jalen Reeves-Maybin more for the coverage. I think they'll use Rodriguez for some of the run defense. When Anzalone comes back, they'll use him in coverage as well. Like they're fine in that aspect. Off the edge, I think this is how James Houston draws into the lineup. I think this is exactly the type of opportunity he's been waiting for. And he's going to probably get, I think you're going to see against Seattle, I think he'll get 10 to 15 pass rush snaps. Go get me a couple pressures. I think that's going to be what is going to happen.
Yeah, for whatever reason they are not the biggest James Houston fans in the world, but this is gonna kind of force the hand. I don't really know what choice you have in this situation. So hopefully he can come in and do what he needs to do. It's really just going to be a drumbeat of conversation until the trade deadline, honestly. That's going to be what it is. That is the obvious need on this roster. Wide
The
receiver,
drums are already banging for Trey Hendrickson. So,
wide receiver maybe, but at the moment, edge is the main one, and we will talk about it week after week after week. It's going to be a bit of an issue, but if they continue to get that interior rush, they can continue to blitz and other parts of the team hold up, it probably won't be a death knell in the regular season. I think it will be okay. And it's just that sort of bigger picture, and you have some time to try and find a solution, but definitely unfortunate. And it always sucks to have it all happen like in one game, but
yeah.
that's football for you.
Yep, it's happened to other teams around the league where all the major injuries pile up at once. It's just an unfortunate reality. For what it's worth, I think we'll see a lot more Wingo and Onwuzurike on the edge in sort of that 3-4 defensive end role going forward, which I think they both are capable of doing. They're both light enough to where they can still have the speed on the outside. And we'll just have to kind of monitor that in week 4, and then in the bye they kind of have a chance to reassess everything.
Yeah,
Now,
the I was not a big fan of the week 5 bye before the season, but now a lot of
yeah.
people are reconsidering that position.
And that seems to be always how it happens. When you have the early bye, for some reason, that's when all the injuries happen. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes later in the year because obviously guys are going to get banged up. But again, we talked about that in the season preview. That's what the whole point of depth is because you have to anticipate people are going to miss games. Now, moving over to the game theory, we talked briefly about the defense. I don't think there's a lot of notes on Aaron Glenn in this game. They played man
Not,
coverage. They played it
not
well,
really. No.
and as far as Dan Campbell, there was a couple fourth down decisions that I don't know people had some gripe with. There was one I think that was on their own side of midfield. Um,
Yeah, they
so
have two fourth down decisions in this game. 4th and 1 at the Arizona 34, up 20-10 in the third quarter. They go. I agreed with that.
mhm.
Maybe there's an argument you let Jake Bates kick there, but
Not
you let
after he
him
missed a
kick if it's
PAT.
you let him kick there if you're up 14.
Yes.
And the field goal makes it a three-score game. 10 versus 13 is not a big difference. You have to go in that situation. They get stuffed. Unfortunate. I don't honestly remember the last time that they were stuffed on a 4th and 1.
Well, so okay, that was a play where first of all, the 3rd and 2 looked like Montgomery had picked it up, and then on 4th and 1, why are you hurrying to the line and trying to get a quick snap
Yeah,
off?
yeah, tempo was weird there. If you're gonna do if you're gonna do it, you need to do like a tempo sneak, honestly. But
Yeah,
they're not.
that's and like Goff is capable of running the sneak. We've seen it before.
Yeah,
It just is one of those where it's like if you're gonna run with Montgomery 4th and 1, just put 6 offensive linemen on the field, run jumbo, and dare them to stop you.
right. So they made the right decision there, just didn't pull it off. Kind of weird play call thing. 4th and 1 at Detroit 47, up 20-10 in the fourth quarter. They punt. I liked that one personally. Your
Yeah,
defense is playing really well. You're up 10 points, fourth quarter. Play
with how
field
good Jack
position.
Fox was in this game.
Exactly, exactly. And field position, by the way, was a big part of the defense's success. I mean, they had a
Yeah,
couple drives where they were able to really field off the fact that they were getting an opponent who was backed up at the shadow of their own goal line, having to run the ball a little bit, set downs
Exactly.
on fire. So
Well,
that,
and like as additionally, like with the touchbacks being at the 30, you're in a spot where two first downs is field goal range, basically. Whereas in this game, with how Fox was punting, two first downs put them at the 30. And so the Lions defense was able to take advantage of that where it was they're going to get yards because that's just how it goes. You're not going to ever have a perfect game, but because they were so backed up, getting a couple yards just meant getting back to a normal starting point.
yeah, overall I was fine with that punt decision in the end. Jack Fox deserves his own little section. Um,
Yeah. The Lions PR put out a tweet. Hold on.
yeah, I saw
They
that one.
So Jack Fox amongst all NFL punters this season, first in percentage of punts pinned inside the 10 at 36.4%. He's first in return yards allowed, which is 0. He's tied for first in total punts returned, which is 1 whatever. Um Total number of punts inside the 10, he already has 4. And he's second in percentage of punts inside the 20 at 72.7%, with 8 total. He has just been great.
Yeah, no, no two ways about that one.
Sh-
He's been one
sh-
of their very best players on this team, and
which used to be a bad thing, but I remember the first time the Lions and Rams took matched up after the trade. It was in LA, and I remember seeing tweets before the game. Wow, look at all the Jax Fox jerseys out here.
yeah, I remember. Wasn't that the game where they ran like two onside kicks and pulled them
Yeah,
both
they had
off
like
or something?
three or
Yeah,
four
like a
trick
fake
plays.
punt. Yeah, that was like the peak of the Campbell trickiness of that first season. But
0-7, baby.
Jake Bates missed an extra point.
Happens.
Is what it is. Harrison
I
Butker missed
people
one
are
in the Sunday night
overreacting to
game.
that,
So
but
yeah,
yeah, like people are gonna overreact to that. Kickers sometimes like if you want to overreact to Jake Bates missing a field goal, go yell about how Justin Tucker has been the worst kicker in the league so far this year.
yeah, he's kind of had a big fall off. Um,
So like as lot like one PAT I can manage.
Yeah, and otherwise, ref talk, there's not much here. I didn't really have any issues. There was I think it was Pascal for roughing the passer. That was kind of borderline to me, but the thing about Kyler Murray is that he's so small that
Yeah,
when you
that's
hit
what where
him,
if you hit Josh Allen like
yeah,
that, they're not gonna call it.
right, but he just bounces off of you if you
Yeah.
hit him, so it stands out. Jalen Reeves may have been picked up a really dumb personal foul that gave him 15 free yards on a field goal drive. That was
Just
bad.
dumb. Yeah,
Don't
just a
do that.
bad. Yeah, like the guy's already down. What are you doing?
Yeah. So otherwise, I don't have anything else besides that. It was a pretty crisp game. Refereeing was good. Coaching was
Yeah.
pretty good. Actually, I do have one thing on the 4th and 1 that they punted on. I agree with the decision. Forgot to mention they take a timeout beside
Oh
before that
yeah.
and
I don't
then
know.
punt. No reason
Like
to do that.
yeah, the timeout management is usually pretty spot on. I don't know what like it was weird. Just take the delay game if you're gonna punt it.
Yeah. So especially in that situation, you're at midfield. Delay a game could help Jack Fox too. So
Yeah.
um, that was dumb, but otherwise, not a lot of other major issues. Get back in the win column. They still have some sloppiness with the flags to work on, but step in the right direction. And I think the defensive progress is maybe the most encouraging thing about the team so far.
Yeah. So moving on from this game, because again, it was just kind of a clean cut win. The kind that there aren't a ton of storylines aside from real injuries in this game that are that notable. So we'll move on here. The Minnesota Vikings, they might be good. They absolutely dismantle the Houston Texans in Minnesota. That defense is looking real good. Sam Darnold is looking very capable as a quarterback with a couple of good weapons around him. I think reports of the Vikings' demise might have been a little over exaggerated.
Yeah, I'm really surprised about that one. Darnold, I mean, maybe surprised he's playing that well, that he'd be in a
I'm
good
not fully
situation.
sold.
Yeah, it remains to be seen. I think Minnesota and Green Bay play this week, I believe.
Yes,
So
they do. That'll be a good one.
that'll be a very interesting game. I continue to not have seen a lot of the Minnesota Vikings play, so I don't have a lot of specific takes on them. Is Brian Flores still the DC?
Yeah.
So last year they were doing, weren't they the team that blitzed like all the time?
Yeah,
And
and they've scaled that back this year. They're blitzing. It's around like in the 20s for percentage. It's a middle of the pack blitzing, but they've worked wonders for like I don't know what switch was flipped, but it's been amazing.
yeah, so I'll be very curious to see them play Green Bay, um, just to get a feel for those two teams. But hey, the Vikings are a well-run team. They have a lot of
Yeah,
talent, and I was a fan of Kevin O'Connell's coaching last year when he was able to navigate the Josh Dobbs and then Nick Mullins as best he could for a lot of that season. And it's a similar thing with the Packers, where Matt LaFleur's been able to navigate the Malik Willis thing. I mean, this is the NFC North right now. You have three franchises that are extremely well-run franchises. The Packers have been extremely well-run for about 30 years.
yeah,
Vikings for the last, 10 or so. And then the Lions have come online fairly recently. We're
yeah. 3 4 years.
still waiting for the Bears to get their act together entirely.
Well, you might be waiting the rest of your life on that one, but it is Caleb had a better game. It was a weird game because he was really bad and then he was okay, and then it was kind of garbage time. A little bit of stat padding there, but that was just that Bears Colts game was a rough watch if you are interested in good quarterback play because both Anthony Richardson and Caleb Williams stunk it up for 3 quarters. The
The
Packers.
the
Oh
interesting thing
yeah.
about that box score, Anthony Richardson 20 pass attempts, Caleb Williams 52 pass attempts.
Yeah, I saw Bears fans that were like, "Wow, he threw for so many yards. I've never seen a Bears quarterback do that in my life." And then it's like, "Yeah, he threw it 50 times against a bad defense."
Also 4 sacks, 31 yards.
And Gardner Minshew's getting benched, or could be benched soon, which means that prediction is going to be looking real good real soon.
Just on your, I mean, I've only seen so much of the Bears. Where do you sort of assess this situation? How much of it is Caleb Williams being young? How much of it is the OL catastrophe,
It's every
coaching?
the I think the problem is it's every Caleb, like you're gonna have growing pains from Caleb regardless, but it's not being helped by the fact that his coaching has not been great. His offensive line has been atrocious, especially the interior. We know that quarterbacks struggle more with interior pressure than edge pressure because it's coming right at their face, and that's what Caleb's been dealing with all year. I will say though, DJ Moore, very good receiver. Romo Dunze has also looked pretty good. He had a really nice game against the Colts on Sunday. So I think there is optimism, but it's gonna like they just there has to be something has to get fixed because the offensive line has been terrible. The play calling has been mediocre at best, and as a result, Caleb's flaws are being magnified.
Yeah, it's pretty ugly, and you have to wonder what the drumbeat in Chicago is like at the moment, given what we saw last night from Jaden Daniels. Uh,
Whole and Bo Nix on Sunday too. Like Bo Nix lit up the Buccaneers as well. So like the rookie quarterbacks have been good. They had a good week overall.
yeah, and Nix has had the negative ones. At least you can kind of balance it out and say it's up and down. Jaden Daniels just
That
looks
was
nasty.
that was in honestly that was probably one of the best three quarterback performances we've seen so far this year.
Oh yeah, that the throw at the end to
To
McLaurin.
McLaurin,
Yeah,
just
right
I
before
thought
he
that
gets
thing.
killed. Like wow.
I thought that ball was going 50 yards out of bounds. Like the fact that that was completed and it was on the money is absolutely incredible because he just moonshotted that one.
Yeah. So it'd be very curious to hear some of the Chicago talk radio whenever you have that. I mean, I remember in 2009, he wasn't even good. He just had a great defense, but there was so much conversation about how the Lions should have taken Mark Sanchez over Stafford for those first year or two when Stafford was constantly injured and Sanchez went to the AFC title game twice. And it's just if Caleb Williams continues to struggle and Daniels is really good, it's that could be really rough in a market with conversation. I'll just say
And
that.
it's not that far. We're not that far removed from the whole. Well, we still in it. The Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud from a year ago, right? So, not that
Yeah.
I do not think C.J. Stroud would have succeeded in Carolina. I don't think anyone would have succeeded in Carolina. But you know what? There is an air of that too. Caleb has not had a lot of help because again, talking about all those facets of the game that are not helping him. Also, they have no run game. DeAndre Swift continues to put up historically awful numbers so far this year. I don't know what, like, I know that he was not as much as good as he was built up to be after running behind Detroit and Philadelphia for the last few years, but man, that is a horrible experiment. Actually, the one play call that everyone was kind of memeing on, I don't know if you saw it. It was 4th and 1,
Yeah.
or 4th and goal from the 1, and after running the ball 3 straight times with Khalil Herbert, they bring DeAndre Swift onto the field and they run our favorite play, the speed option, to the outside. And DeAndre Swift, again, 4th and goal from the 1, he gets the ball at the 6 yard line and is faced with 4 defenders. And it's like, what do you expect him to do?
It it's pretty rough for Bears fans, but I will say the other thing that at least came up on my mind, how much do you make of the 49ers at 1-2?
I'll add the Cowboys into that mix as well because
Sure.
both, um, I think they're both in very similar situations where they're going to be fine, but it is noteworthy because them dropping games early on opens up the window for, like, if you're looking at long term, the number one seed is the goal for the Lions this year, right? You want to secure home field and you want to secure a bye in the first round. Who would you say is the favorite for the one seed right now? Because this, if the Lions can kind of figure out the offense here, it's open. It's available to them if they want to go take it.
Well, the 3-0 teams right now are Vikings and Seahawks, just as we all predicted. And the Seahawks, you have a head-to-head game coming up with. Vikings, you have two head-to-head games coming up with, so you're feeling good about that. And the Eagles at 2-1, Cowboys 1-2, Niners 1-2. It's decently favorable at the moment. Rams at 1-2, Falcons 1-2. Maybe the Saints and Bucks are still scary. I don't know. I think it's totally up in the air for the one seed at the moment. No
I
one's
I
really run away with it yet. At least,
I think that
looked like it.
the biggest thing is the Lions have games against everyone that is going to be a
Right.
threat for it, except for the Eagles. So just take care of it. And I'm not that scared of the Eagles anyways. So if the Lions just take care of business and keep playing their brand of football, they have as good a chance as anyone at getting that. Now, obviously, the Niners have dealt with a lot of injuries, and that has impacted them a lot early on, and that has made Brock Purdy look a lot more human, which is, kind of what we expect. A little bit of Mark Bulger syndrome going on there, I think. But Cowboys, they'll be good in the regular season. But that defense
Their
looks,
defense looks really bad.
I'm, dare I say, excited to play against them in week 6.
Was Dan Quinn
He
the biggest
was
piece
in,
of that coaching
yeah,
staff?
he might have been. I think Mike McCarthy's done. Like, there's
Yeah.
no way he
I can't
survives.
believe he's
And
back. How is he back after that playoff game?
I think, like, assuming they, unless he wins a playoff game this year, he's done. And I think they're going to replace him with Belichick.
Defensive coordinator Matt Patricia as well. So,
Haha! Everyone's favorite TV host with
did you see
Belichick
he
there.
looking different on that TV show? Lost a lot of weight. He looks, especially without the pencil and the hat, he looks very
It,
different.
him without a hat in general just looks odd to me
Yeah.
because it's like, who is this man? And you forget that he ruined the franchise and ran everyone out of town. But aside from that, I do want to just highlight again, like we talked about the Packers, but that coaching masterclass continues. Matt LaFleur is working wonders over there. Their defense looks legit. The Packers, I'm a lot more scared of the Packers than I am the Vikings right now. Like, even though the Vikings have looked really
Sure.
good, the Packers terrify me. I'm not gonna lie. Like, they look real good, especially if Jordan Love comes back and finds his rhythm. Like, that they have a receiving core of guys that are good, not great, but they have a lot of them. Josh Jacobs, I don't think he's amazing, but I think he's still a good running back. But if that defense is something, then that is going to be worth monitoring. I will say they haven't exactly played stellar competition the last
Yeah,
couple weeks.
that's kind of my thing is like with the Vikings, at least defensively, okay, they played the Texans, they played the Niners. Sure, this is interesting. Packers played the Eagles and gave up a lot of points, and then they played the Colts and Titans, and
This week is going to be very I'm going to be glued to that Packers Vikings game.
it'll tell us a decent bit, that's for sure.
Yeah, and we know that both teams will get up for that game. Do you have any other storylines around the league?
No, not really.
All right, then we can go ahead and dive into the Seattle Seahawks, Aaron Glenn's nemesis, in what is the game. So we talked about how the Rams and Buccaneers had the Lions circled on their calendar, playoff rematches. The Lions better have this game circled, especially the defense better have this game circled because it's been what 3 years in a row that the Seahawks have absolutely lit up Aaron Glenn's defense, and that just can't happen again.
Yeah, before the season, I think I said that there were two games that I wanted to win more than any other on the schedule. One was the Thanksgiving game against the Bears for holiday reasons, for vibes reasons, etc. Not a lot of rationale behind it other than the losing streak needs to end. Seahawks game, there's a lot more of an obvious reason. That this is a team that you lost to 3 years in a row, 3 years in a row, really bad defensive performances. First year, okay. It's to the end of a really bad season. You don't have a lot of talent. It is what it is. You're on the road. Last 2 years, pretty grim. So week two, I think it was 2 years, or maybe it was week three 2 years ago.
It was early. All like the last two have been
Yeah,
early
yeah. I
season.
think I think 2 years ago was week three. Last year was week two. In both cases, the game 2 years ago, just disaster. No real other way to put it. Really awful performance. Gave up something like 400, 500 yards in that game. It was like 50 points, 51 to 45 or something. I mean, just a
It was
ridiculous game.
yeah, it was wild.
Last year was a little lower scoring. It goes to overtime, but they lose the coin toss and they lose the game because they could not get a stop. This is the Aaron Glenn legacy game. This is a measuring stick of how far you've come along as a defensive unit because, yeah, Seahawks have a pretty good team. They have some good pass catchers, good running backs, but this isn't the greatest show on turf. It's not an offense that should have been slicing you up like that year after year. And this is your chance to kind of redeem yourself. And I think on the flip side, defensively, I'm not super high on their personnel overall, but they do have Mike Macdonald, head coach, former Michigan defensive coordinator, followed by Ravens defensive coordinator, who had better personnel, but absolutely smoked the Lions in that matchup last year when he was coordinating the Ravens defense. So really both sides of the ball have some getting even to do, so to speak.
Yeah, and I will say the Seahawks they're 3-0. It's a little bit of a paper tiger though so far because running through their matchups, they played Bo Nix in his first career game. They they've played the New England Patriots, who are expected to be a bottom five team in the NFL, and they played the Miami Dolphins, and they knocked out their backup quarterback, and then played a little bit of Tim Boyle in that game. So they have not exactly faced a lot of competition, and the Lions are by far the best offense they've played against so far. So their defense being ranked like second against the pass so far, do not read into that because it's completely fraudulent. They are, I think, an average defense. I think they have some players that will give the Lions some problems. They have a very good pass rush so far that has been getting home a lot with pressure, and they have some exciting young corners that have gotten the better of the Lions in the past, but the Seahawks have not played a good team yet. So just be careful before you overreact to the stats that the Seahawks have put up through 3 games.
I can't believe that Tim Boyle's still going.
He's going to start
How?
next week.
Oh my God.
If Skylar Thompson's out, Tim Boyle is starting an NFL game next week.
He's maybe my favorite quarterback because that guy was a bad quarterback in college.
Was it,
Bad.
didn't he only have like one passing touchdown in college?
I think he had more, but he had more interceptions than
Yeah.
touchdowns. That was the crucial part. And I believe some of those games were in the FCS. He also played for UConn, one of the worst FBS teams. Like, completely baffling that this guy is starting NFL games without any reason. But you got to tip your hat to him. Seahawks overall, they put up 26 points against Broncos, 23 against New England, 24 against Dolphins. Solid.
None of those are good defenses. It should be
No,
noted.
like, okay, but you didn't really do anything stunning. Geno so far this season, 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. 75% completion is nice, 7.5 yards an attempt, but the interceptions are definitely worth noting. Zach Charbonnet was the bell cow last week. former Michigan Wolverine, then later UCLA Bruin, 18 carries for 91 yards. What's the Kenneth Walker injury
It's
situation?
so he's been listed as doubtful going into each of the last few games. He's dealing with an oblique injury. I would put him at less than 50% to play in this game.
I definitely will take that injury luck if you can get it. He's a good player. Charbonnet's pretty good as well. Like they have pieces. You look at those wide
The
receivers,
the
Metcalf and
note is
JSN.
with Charbonnet is infinitely less explosive. That
Yeah,
like he can take on a bell cow role, but he's not explosive. The Lions should be able to contain him. Whereas if Kenneth Walker was playing, the big play threat would be there, as Michigan fans know very well from playing against the Spartans over the years. As Kenneth Walker can definitely do some damage.
it's kind of funny to me that Kenneth Walker and Mike McDonald are now together because by far Mike McDonald's worst moment as Michigan defensive coordinator was that matchup with MSU, where he was like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to play a 5-1 front. So we'll have one linebacker try to tackle Kenneth Walker third in open space if he gets past the defensive line. And if he can't do it, it's a touchdown. It didn't go very well. So just a funny little note there. But yeah, this is a solid Seahawks team, but it's nothing that jumps off the page to you as anything incredible. You're at home, Monday Night Football. You'd hope the fans will be really rowdy. There's a chance now out of nowhere that fans will be coming in riding off a stunning Detroit Tiger run to the playoffs sort of thing. And the Monday would be the off day before the playoffs start. If that happens and the Tigers pull this off, downtown Detroit will be out of control on Monday night before that game. So
Yeah.
you got to win this one. You just have to. It is the NFL. Anyone can beat anyone. I am a little worried about McDonald's system against Goff and his read so far this year, but you just got to find a way to win this one. I don't really know what else to say.
Should note, I'm pretty sure I'd have to go fact check this, but I'm pretty sure in each of the last two, the games that were in Ford Field, Jared Goff has thrown a pick six in both of them.
Yeah, he was
So,
generally pretty good in those games, but he like have the one just like devastating
and the
year. And
one
I think
last year was like ending the huge no turnover streak or no interception
right.
streak, and it was like, oh no, he finally threw it. Oh no, and it's a pick six. Okay, well this game's over. But then they came back and then they still lost.
What I remember about last year's game is I think the Lions were up at halftime and we were feeling pretty good, and
It
then
was
like
14-7 at halftime.
right off the bat, doesn't David Montgomery put the ball on the ground and
Yeah, I think
the
so.
Seahawks recover, and then it just cascaded from there. So this is one you expect your team to be fired up for, and at the end of the day, if you can win it, you can go into the bye week at 3-1, have some wounds, but you'll be feeling pretty good overall, and you just got to get there.
I will say the thing I remember from last year's game is that was the peak of the Lions have no pass rush. Is
Yeah.
in week two, it was brutal. They got a sack at the end of the game because Geno Smith held the ball for 45 seconds and Alex Anzalone finally said enough's enough. But the pass rush did absolutely nothing last year. That can't happen again. Hutchinson has been on top of the world. The interior has been getting home. The Lions have got to rattle Geno Smith in this game. That is going to be the key to stopping him because these wide receivers are very good. And as much as we just hyped up Carlton Davis and Terrion Arnold, I do not exactly like their odds against DK Metcalf on extended plays. Tyler Lockett's still kicking around, and Jackson Smith and Jigba is tied with Metcalf for the most receptions right now on the Seahawks. They have three wide receivers that are going to pose problems. Amik Robertson is also going to have a big game against JSN. That's I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but this is one where he's going to play a lot. The Lions have got to get home. So we talked about it. Aaron Glenn legacy game. The Lions will be debuting their the black jerseys on Monday
Oh
night.
yeah, I forgot about that.
So everyone should be happy about that, and hopefully, surely this will go better than the last few times, right? So, Alex, do you have any closing thoughts here?
Just got to win this one. Rest up, come back better to take out the Cowboys in a couple weeks. But I would very much enjoy another win. I would enjoy a strong defensive effort that makes you really think this unit is actually pretty good. Hopefully, we'll get it.
Yep. So we'll be back next. We will be back next week with another review of this game, and then heading into the bye and where we're at that point. But until then, that'll be it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening or watching if you're on YouTube. Make sure to follow the show, follow us on social media, and we'll see you next time. Cheers, everyone.